efficiency, harnessing ERP for seamless back office operations. We're so glad you can join us today. My name is Nancy Quello. I am in the marketing department at Markham Technology, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping rules to cover. Markham LLP and Markham Technology LLC have prepared these materials as part of an educational program. The information contained herein is of a general nature and is not intended to address the circumstances of any particular individual, entity, or case. While every effort has been made to offer current and accurate information, errors can occur. Furthermore, laws and regulations referred to in this program may change over time and should be interpreted only in the light of particular circumstances. The information presented here should not be construed as legal, tax, accounting, or valuation advice. No one should act on such information without appropriate professional advice after a thorough examination of the particular circumstances, particular situation or circumstances. Now, logistics. During today's program, you can submit questions to our presenter using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom platform. We will get to as many questions as we can towards the end of the webinar. We will also be emailing a copy of the slides and the link to the recording to all attendees post-event. If you would like to receive continuing professional education credits for CPAs for attending today's session, you will need to be active in the platform for a minimum of 50 minutes and answer 3 polling questions that will appear on your screen at random times during the presentation. Each poll will be active for 1 minute. Please be sure to select an answer and submit your responses for tracking purposes. Also, please allow 24 to 48 hours for us to process the CPE credit. Now, without further ado, I will pass it along to Rob Drover, Vice President at Markham Technology. Rob?
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining on this afternoon. Appreciate it. So just before I get into introductions, talk about the objectives of today's webinar. We're really looking at the power of ERP and trying to understand if you have an ERP platform today, or if you're considering upgrading from, let's say, just a basic accounting system into a fully integrated ERP. What kind of engine do you have under the hood is a good way to put it. So you're really buying a sports car, and you're buying it with a lot of bells and whistles. And I think one of the themes for today is really trying to uncover all of the power of a advanced ERP system like we're going to talk about today. And we're going to use a product called Acumatica really as our template, and I'll introduce Acumatica in a few minutes. We want to help you solve some of your back office challenges. So whether you're in the accounting and finance function, whether you're in an operations team in customer service, whether you're on the manufacturing shop floor, you're interacting with your back office, the folks and the systems that provide you your financial statements at the end of the month, that provide you your key performance indicators, that help process the payroll. So we're going to try to look at some of those challenges and what can be done from an automation perspective, all within the power of the ERP. And then we're going to look at, we're going to talk a little bit about manufacturing and distribution and some of the roles and functions that are involved there and how they relate to, kind of back office tasks. And then obviously, I'm very interested in any questions you might have, some of the themes and the messages that I try to get across. And I'm going to try to make this as educational as possible. Again, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about Acumatica today as the platform, but really these concepts are relevant to any ERP platform that you may be involved with. All right. So quick introduction. Again, as Nancy mentioned, my name is Rob Drover. I'm the Vice President of Business Solutions here at Markham Technology. I'm based out of the Philadelphia, PA office of Markham, and have been in the consulting space for well over 20 years. My background is really around process improvement. So I think you're going to see that theme today really come to the forefront as I talk about, how to leverage your ERP platform and how to leverage your investment or your future investment to really drive the best value. And again, I mentioned I'm going to talk a little bit about Acumatica as a product. Acumatica is a cloud ERP platform, and I think it has a lot of the features and functions that I'm going to talk about today that are really native to the product and really allow you to maximize back office efficiency. So before we get started, I just want to give some brief background for those of you who are not familiar with Marcum or Marcum Technology. Marcum Technology is a full-service professional consulting firm. We are a national firm. You can see from some of the footprint across the United States. We have access to over almost 300 professionals and technologists in the IT and consulting space. And we are a wholly owned division of Marcum LLP, the accounting firm. We are interested and participate in a wide variety of industries. A lot of the work we do crosses many different industries. So people will often ask me, do you have experience in one industry or another? And we certainly do at the broad firm level. And we also have worked in many of these industries ourselves from a technology perspective. But what you're going to find is many of the themes that I talk about today are applicable across many organizations in many different industry types. So this is not specifically a conversation about manufacturing or nonprofit or construction. A product like this, a large ERP cloud system, can operate across industries with various iterations that we'll talk about. Marcum Technology offers really 5 pillars of service, including cloud and infrastructure solutions. So a lot of what used to be the hardware side of the business has now become sort of cloud enablement and helping organizations migrate to the cloud. We have a managed IT services practice that can provide desk side support and other forms of remote managed support for your organization. An area of particular focus these days, obviously, is cybersecurity. And we have a team focused in that area around cybersecurity, both from a practical perspective, like doing penetration testing on applications, doing hardening of your network and firewalls, but also providing what we call a virtual CISO service, which would be that chief information security officer that can help build policies and procedures for your organization. We also have a strategic consulting practice that will do things like IT due diligence. We help clients select different applications like an ERP platform and other digital transformation type activities. And finally, the team that I lead is called Digital Consulting. And we're a very broad group. We have everything from automation tools like RPA, we have data analytics, we specialize in blockchain and digital assets. And then the area that is a particular focus today really is around financial and ERP solutions and their implementation. And then the companion products like financial planning and analysis tools. All right, so as Nancy mentioned, just to make sure everybody's paying attention and getting your CP credit, we have 4 polling questions throughout the presentation today. So if you could take a moment to take a look at the question, what solution are you currently using as an ERP? And that may be anything from a name brand product like Acumatica or one of the Sage products, or even QuickBooks, which some folks would argue is an ERP. Or another solution. So just take a moment and answer that question. But in the meantime, we'll get moving with the presentation. All right. So I want to give you a little bit of information about Acumatica as a product and some of its features. So really, Acumatica was built as a cloud-first product designed for the middle market. So it's not really designed for large, Fortune 100 enterprise clients. It's really for that either privately held or PE owned or smaller business that needs an ERP platform, whether you're involved in manufacturing, whether you're involved in distribution, e-commerce. There is a version of the system for all. And it's really been built with the technology, and I'll talk about the platform in a moment, to enable what we call digital transformation, meaning being able to provide those services and those back office functions that our customers, our clients, and your customers and clients are demanding in a more rapid and efficient fashion. Acumatica provides a number of modules, so things like the financial module, the inventory module, the fixed assets module, but it's also then packaged in what are called additions. And these additions are really a collection of underlying functional modules that are put together in the best design for each of these different industry solutions. So obviously, if you're in the distribution business and you don't manufacture anything, you don't need those manufacturing specific modules. However, you may be involved in all facets. For example, there are construction companies out there that do their own manufacturing of certain parts, and they go out and they actually build a project. So they need project accounting, and then they also do field service. They're going to need field service for the post-warranty support. So there are certainly blends across the editions, but these packages are put together to kind of best suit the needs. Now, one of the very strong features of Acumatica, and where it's going to play in here as I talk later about some of the back office automation, is really around the design of Acumatica as what's called a platform. So while the ERP is a software as a service, meaning it's delivered through the cloud, it's actually built on an underlying platform. And so if I start from the bottom, what we're really talking about is a technology stack. So all those things like HTML5 and SQL Server and .NET and other development tools and approaches that are put together in a stack. They're all modern. They're open-ended. They're easy to support. It's easy to find resources to work on these platforms. And then we put in common frameworks like login, security, roles and responsibilities, ease of import, ease of export. All those sort of functions are included in what's called the platform. And then the application is actually built on top of the platform. So not only has Acumatica built their own ERP on their own platform, but other solutions and other partners have then built applications either in an interface mode where you plug them into Acumatica, or they're natively built within Acumatica to the point where you wouldn't even know that they're part of a different system. And another interesting feature, and this definitely comes into play as we talk about back office automation, is the fact that it's an unlimited user model for Acumatica. So the idea is to encourage everybody in the organization to have a login and access to the system, and not just for accounting and not just for sales or not just for customer service, but everybody in the organization should have the ability to access the system and be able to enter data, which is really the whole premise of ERP in the first place. It's supposed to be integrated, and it's supposed to be enterprise, meaning it spans across the organization. It's also available as both what we call a public cloud and a private cloud, meaning that it can be hosted through Acumatica's SaaS environment and really spun up, almost immediately. Or for certain clients that wish to have things run in a private cloud, you can still run it in Amazon Web Services or Azure. You'd run your own version of the platform. All right, so I want to talk about a couple of sort of the key areas around things like the selling and distribution side of the business, and then manufacturing, and then we'll get into some specific examples. So you can see from the different roles in a distribution organization, and many of these are back office roles. So we have everything from the business executives that are looking, they're managing the results, they're making actionable decisions, they're doing strategic plans. They need those KPIs, those dashboards, those reports in order to make accurate and timely business decisions. But contrast that with someone out in the warehouse who's picking and packing an order. Again, eliminating things like paper movement and being able to do everything direct from an order entry screen. Once that order has been finalized and ready to ship, it immediately shows up on the dashboard or the tablet or the mobile phone or the barcode scanner of the person in the warehouse to allow them to pick, pack, and ship. Maybe I mentioned earlier, on the customer support side or the order entry side, being able to have full access to inventory in a real-time fashion. Have that integrated into the e-commerce platform so that if someone buys inventory off e-commerce, it immediately is protected and blocked and is not be able to be sold by a customer service agent within the organization. Things like purchasing, making sure that, again, when you issue a purchase order, it immediately updates the inventory screens or the materials requirement planning screens if you're in manufacturing, to know that if I need 100 widgets next week, I can look to see that purchase order has already been issued to my vendor, and I know what the delivery date is on that material. So these integrations are vital in order to avoid a lot of the double keying and the double entry and the email back and forth that goes on in many organizations today. Likewise, I mentioned manufacturing. And again, this idea of a unlimited user model and having people like the shop floor workers be able to enter their time on a mobile device, be able to barcode tickets when they do a job. So if you're doing job costing or you're doing project accounting, being able to gather that data from the field live in real time through a barcode scanner is certainly much more preferable than them filling out a paper log, handing them in at the end of the day, or sending notes when they completed a piece of work. Having those transactions generated in real time makes a significant difference. So as we kind of start to delve down into some of the back office operations, what I've done is I've chosen a whole laundry list of activities that I wanted to take you through, but just kind of level set a little bit. Our working environment is certainly adapted, right? We're all in this hybrid mode today. People are in and out of offices. We're hiring people across the country to work in roles as opposed to common centers. So the need for real-time connection, the need for systems, the need for streamline operations is even more important than ever. And automation and efficiency have never been more important than they were today. But they haven't changed really, quite honestly, I would argue, since back in the 90s when business process reengineering was a fad. And I say a fad because it died away and it really shouldn't have. The idea of continually improving your back office operation is something that should be ongoing and should be part of everybody's objectives on an annual basis. And then finally, something that I think we can all buy into is that the transaction volumes and the data requirements per employee, so in other words, productivity or the push for increased productivity is just increasing dramatically. Headcount's not climbing because it's difficult to hire, and therefore we're all dealing with more and more hitting our plates every day. All right, so for those of you who've been in the financial space or anywhere in the operation space for many years, I would argue that the traditional view of accounting 20 years ago it's all about it's the books and the records, right? It's the general ledger, it's the income statement and balance sheet. Maybe we generate invoices out of our accounting system, but that's kind of where we were, 15, 20 years ago. Along comes this concept of ERP, which fully integrates everything into one platform. Now we've moved from on-premise systems mostly to now cloud-based systems. And what does that do for us? Well, number one, it allows us to access the system pretty much anywhere on any device. But it also allows us to take on many more roles, and it allows the vendors like Acumatica to be able to publish new interfaces and new updates to their software much more quickly and get that out to everybody so that we're all sharing the same common code base. So again, the message here is the complexity is growing from simple accounting to fully integrated, shipping integration, advanced analytics, material resource planning, you name it, it's all becoming part of the ERP package. All right, polling question number 2. And this is kind of a level setting question here in terms of, given your experience with your current ERP, do you feel that you're achieving value? And really my theme today is, are we just using it for bookkeeping, or are we actually using a lot of the advanced features of our ERP system to really drive our back office efficiency? So take a moment and answer that question. We'll be interested in your feedback. All right. So one of my arguments, and I think this slide kind of outlines it, is that a lot of these packages are so complex, and I use Office 365 as a simple example, or Microsoft Office back when it was on premise, that there are many hidden features in a package like Office, and there are many hidden features in an ERP platform. They interviewed the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, and he acknowledged the fact that a lot of their customers complain that says, look, you've got a tremendous amount of capability in this platform, but we're only using 5% of it. We're not getting our value, right? And his comment back is understood, and but everybody uses a different 5%, and everybody is finding value in various pockets. And I think the trick is, and what I hope to get out of today's discussion, is helping you unleash some of that hidden and embedded capabilities that are in a system like Acumatica. So, oops. So when we talk about automation, I just want to level set what we mean by that. Automation can mean everything from a macro, which has been out for 30 years, to robotic process automation, which has really hit the forefront in probably the last 5 to 8 years. It could involve integration with third parties, just plugging in 2 separate systems together so that they can talk to each other. Where I'm really going to talk today is around embedded ERP automation, meaning what are the features and functions within your platform already that you may not even be aware of, or may not be utilizing, or may realize that your accounting system today just doesn't even have it. That's where we're going to want to focus. And again, not to diminish any of the other technologies, and we're certainly very interested in and participating in all of them. But let's focus on what's inside your ERP today. And let's try to grab an additional 10% as a goal. If we're only using 5% today, let's get that to 10, let's get that to 15, and you'll see a dramatic difference in efficiency. So just throwing out a whole bunch of terms here, I call the automation laundry list. So it's really just a whole series of features that are already embedded in a platform like Acumatica. And you may look at this list and scan down and go, yeah, I use dashboards. Obviously, I run reports. We have some interfaces, but I didn't know that there was, capability in there to do some of my 1099 pre-work. I didn't know that the ability to do allocations from my general ledger. I didn't know that anomaly detection was a feature. I'm not using notifications. So I just say this to you to say that there are a lot of hidden functions, and we'll cover off a lot of them here today. So the first one I'm going to start with, because I think it's core to any organization, is the general ledger. For any of us that are accountants or in the accounting and finance function, we understand that the general ledger is where all of our business transactions, journal entries, where they all end up. Many organizations use what I would call a sort of a compromised set of natural accounts, meaning that they code into their general ledger a series of smart codes to try to account for revenue by product or by region or by salesperson or otherwise. And so they'll have the same revenue account listed in their chart of accounts 22 times because they're booking to very specific charts of accounts, and they have reports written, for the East region that only have certain charts of accounts in them in order to try to segment them. And what a modern tool like Acumatica is going to do is provide what are called sub-accounts or dimensions, which will allow you to break that general ledger down into a more finite level, but you get to keep the natural account. So let's just say revenue is 40,000 as your code. You can have a series of digits and strings, could be alphanumeric, after that 40,000, that then provides you the ability to have a branch structure or a product structure or something else that then matches the way you want to evaluate your business. So I think the question is, how do the business leaders, how do the business owners, how do the executive directors within your organization, how do they want to run the business? How do they want to see the business? And then design the chart of account structure with the sub-accounts appropriately in order to meet that need. And I would argue it's one of the most important tasks to do when we're starting. So when we do an implementation, we sit and spend a lot of time with our clients to make sure we get this GL structure correct. And in many cases, we're breaking up that very complicated structure that they had in the past and simplifying it with a natural account, sub-account structure. This is just an example of some of these screens are going to be what look like configuration screens, but it just helps me describe kind of how things work. And really what we're doing here is we're creating a sub-account logic by product group and department. So you have the ability with a 30-character GL string to break that into a series of sub-accounts by any different segment that you may need. And then what you end up with is sort of a catalog of sub-accounts. So these may be, again, service lines, these may be product lines and product groupings. So you can have different segments within your account or different sub-accounts that will allow you to book revenue, cost, and so on to your general ledger. And then what that does, what it really facilitates, is ease of financial reporting. So I no longer have to go in and build separate reports for the consulting group or the operations group or the purchasing group. I simply hit my drill down in my report and pick those from a pick list, and then the system automatically slices and dices the financial statement appropriately. So again, very powerful. Again, can apply to revenue, can apply to cost as well. All right. Next one I want to highlight, again, been around for a long time, but I wonder how many people actually use it, and that's recurring journal entries. So just being able to set up things like, booking certain recurring expenses that happen on a regular basis. So rather than waiting till the bank rec comes in and having to try to match missing transactions, set up all of your recurring transactions that are automated and the same on some kind of a schedule, daily, weekly, monthly. How many occurrences? When does it start? When does it end? And then in Acumatica, you have the ability to actually then capture that history as sort of an embedded screen, so that you can come in here at any point in time and set up these entries and see what's run and when they have run. All right. Another very powerful feature that many people may or may not utilize are what we call GL allocations. So the idea of bringing in, let's say, or taking executive salaries and breaking that down into the various business units based on a percentage of revenue or some other statistical measure. You have the ability with GL allocations to, again, automate that process of taking cost from one bucket and splitting it into multiple buckets, and then potentially running another allocation to split from that bucket into further buckets, and sort of as many steps as you may need to get to your ideal situation. This is relevant in private enterprise just as much as it's relevant in nonprofit. In the nonprofit space, where you have grants and other budgets out there that have to be very carefully managed, and you're only allowed to allocate certain percentages of cost, this is a great way of making sure that those allocations happen exactly in a very timely fashion. I will tell you that even internally ourselves, we've moved from doing manual allocations with spreadsheets to using the allocation module within Acumatica, which has significantly increased our efficiency in terms of how fast we can turn things around at a month-end perspective. And you'll see one of my themes later on, obviously, is the true measure here is how fast can we generate that month-end results and those financial statements to provide all of our stakeholders the information that they need, rather than waiting till the third week of the month. Let's see if we can get that done in the first week of the month. So allocations are a very powerful tool. Again, you set them up at some sort of a parent account. You provide the allocation logic, and then you provide what sub-accounts they go to and the corresponding percentages. And then the system will just run automatically at a predetermined point. All right. Polling question number 3. What AP automation solutions are you using today? We're going to talk about accounts payable automation here in a minute, and there are a variety of different approaches, which I'll get into. The first one is using the embedded capabilities within your ERP platform, and then there are other solutions like Bill and other third-party solutions that are out there. Or in some cases, you're doing manual AP, meaning you're getting mailed in invoices, you're getting emailed invoices. The accounts payable team is downloading those PDFs, they're printing the paper, they're going into the system, and they're actually keying them from scratch. So there's a variety of different solutions. So take a minute and please go ahead and vote. All right, so I mentioned accounts payable automation, and let's talk about what's embedded and kind of what's not embedded. So there are really 2 ways to break down accounts payable in my point of view. That's between the extraction process, meaning pulling information out of an invoice, and then there's the concept of actually paying and approving and so on that invoice itself, or I should say approving first, then paying. And there really could be actually 2 separate functions. In some large organizations, accounts payable may be separated from treasury, meaning that accounts payable does the extraction, the data entry, somebody approves it, and then treasury actually does the cash payment. Oops, I skipped a slide here. We're out of order here. Bear with me a minute. All right, I'll go back to intercompany in a second. So on the AP extraction side, what a product like Acumatica has, and other platforms will have as well, is they have some form of automated extraction capability. Usually uses some form of machine learning, and the idea is that the system will recognize a document as an invoice, and it will then recognize certain fields on that invoice in order to pull the information directly off the invoice. So it does sort of an OCR and an extraction, and then populates the fields on the left-hand side for vendor and date and total amount and so on. So what it does is it gives you that leg up a little bit on the extraction process to save a bit of time, so people are not keying information directly. And then someone on the accounts payable team can come in, they can verify that everything looks accurate. They can do any additional extraction at a line item level if necessary. And then they can push that on for the next step in the approval process. Okay, so that's the extraction side. And that's available today in many ERP platforms already. Not to say that there are not other third-party tools out there that can do the same work. For example, Bill.com has the ability to do extractions. You really just have to understand what capability you have within your system and compare and contrast that with whether you want to use a third-party tool. All right. On the payment side, you have several different options. The first, which is embedded in your ERP platform, embedded in Acumatica, is the ability to make automated ACH payments. So you've ingested the invoice, you've run it through an approval cycle, it's approved to be paid. Your vendor is set up in the system. They provided you information. You can then extract a file and you can send that to your bank, and your bank will generate those ACH payments directly to the vendor's bank account. Okay, so that's one option. The other option is you can use an integrated third-party platform. So these are payment platforms like Bill or like Topology or others that will allow you to basically send over your vendor information, your invoice information, push it through their engine, extract the information, go through an approval loop, and then actually have a product like Bill or others pay that bill on your behalf and take the money out of your bank account. So again, two kind of polar opposites. Both can work equally as well, but again, you have that embedded capability within your ERP platform that may be of interest to some, because there are costs for third-party platforms, right? So you pay for that convenience aspect of having someone else make those payments on your behalf, and of course, they're not only are they charging you for those services, but they're also making money on the float a little bit as they take money out of your account, you know, slightly in advance of when those payments actually take place. All right, I'm going to go back one because I skipped intercompany. So another area of automation is around intercompany transactions. So some of you may have multiple legal entities. You may be consolidating those. You may have to eliminate intercompany transactions. You may also create what we call due to and due from entries on your balance sheet, meaning that if you have a transaction between related parties, when you issue a invoice to the other party, it becomes a receivable for that party. And this concept of due to, due from allows you to easily track those relationships and be able to eliminate them very easily. So in Acumatica, through their intercompany module, you can set that up automatically. So when you create a journal entry and you pick a particular branch, which might be actually another legal entity, it automatically creates the due to, due from entries for you automatically without having to do any extra work. All right. This reconciliation feature is definitely a powerful one. And again, the concept of reconciliations, we all go through it, starting with the very simple, bank reconciliation to make sure that every entry in your cash account has been reflected in your books and records. That's sort of base reconciliation 101. What a product like Acumatica will allow you to do is connect to your bank account for each of your bank accounts, including your credit card accounts, and bring in those transactions. So you can bring them in on a daily basis. You can bring them in once a week, however often you want to sort of refresh the inventory, but you're going to bring in every transaction that hits the cash or the credit card account and it's going to try to do an auto matching with the transactions that are already in your system, and then highlight any gaps and areas where you don't have a match. And then what you can do then is combine that with some sort of a notification process, perhaps, to notify relevant individuals that there are unreconciled transactions in the bank rec process, and that they should look to address those. Or you can click and create those transactions, on the fly as you're doing that bank reconciliation. So the important thing is connecting to the bank account, getting the detailed transactions coming in automatically without you having to do that in a separate offline spreadsheet-based method, is a very powerful tool, and will correct a lot of faults and a lot of issues. And this is something that can go on throughout the month, so you're not trying to do it at month end. At that time. All right, another area, and I'm throwing a lot at you, but again, it's just the idea of just understanding all these embedded features that are out there today, that may or may not being used. And again, we're really only scratching the surface of the capability of these platforms. So when we look at time and expense management, many of us use payroll companies to do time, right? So we collect the time through some app that the payroll company provides, and then at month end or during the month, we try to integrate those into our system. It may be particularly important for those of you who do project-based billing or project-based cost collection. It's very important that you get time charged to those correct project codes. Likewise with expenses, people are submitting expenses maybe on paper. People are going into the to the online system potentially, or even a third-party system like a Concur or others, and they're entering detail, and then you're syncing those across to your financial system. Again, nothing wrong with a product like Concur, works great in certain circumstances, but you also have the ability in a lot of the ERP tools to do native time and expense management using a mobile app. So on the right-hand side here, we took a picture with our phone. It actually automatically scraped some of the information off the invoice or off the expense item itself, and did some basic allocation. And then the employee can update those allocations. They can charge it to a project, and they can hit submit, and it goes in sort of in real time into the project management, project accounting system, and also into the the pending expense payable side as well. Same applies for time. They can enter their time on a mobile application and code that to a particular project, a particular task. If I'm on the shop floor, I'm doing manufacturing, I can code it to a production run. I can update lot numbers. I can do a whole bunch of information from my mobile device in order to update the ERP platform in real time. All right. A relatively new area, and it's really being brought to the forefront through the use of AI techniques and machine learning and so on, is anomaly detection. And that's really looking for anomalies or things that don't look right in your books and records, in your ERP platform. And I would say that you can look at a financial statement on a month-to-month basis and see trends and patterns through the naked eye fairly easily. Okay, why did my cost of goods sold just jump by 20% when my revenue was flat? I mean, those are the kinds of things any good business analyst can pick up on those extremely quickly, any CFO or controller. What's more difficult to see are the underlying issues, and I'm not really talking about fraud, although that's certainly a component of it, but it may be just it's miscoding, it's data misalignment issues that you would never see even if you were looking at a profit and loss statement broken out across product lines or segments or business units, because they're just buried in the details. And something like anomaly detection, this idea of looking at the general ledger, looking at the transactions, and detecting patterns and things that are different than the norm, and highlighting those to you for review, is a new and up and coming feature that's being embedded in the platforms. It also includes the ability to look at those suggested anomalies and kick off some kind of corrective action workflow. So meaning if you detect miscoded and bad data, you can press a button and notify that person that they need to fix it, or perhaps you can even press a button and fix the data right there from that screen after the anomaly has been detected. So a powerful and up and coming feature in the platforms that you should look out for. All right. So we're getting down towards sort of the tail end here, but really what I wanted to focus on, and for those of you that are involved in the month-end process, you can appreciate what we talk about in terms of close management. It's actually a relatively new area in the whole financial journey. So we talk about ERP implementations, we talk about financial planning and analysis. Excuse me. Now we're starting to talk about close management and close management efficiency. So it's a number of functions. I talked about reconciliations a few minutes ago. That's a big part of it. But also is this idea of measuring and looking at the tasks that you participate in on a monthly basis at a very detailed and granular level. So if month end for you today takes 2 weeks or it takes 1 week, doesn't matter. There's probably 100 tasks or 150 tasks done by 10 different people to close the books out from the point of the end of a month or the end of a quarter until you actually consider those books closed. Starting to actually look at what those tasks are and how long they take. And I'm not saying do it once, I'm saying it doing every month, and keep a log and really in a very detailed fashion understand where you're spending your time, because you can use those studies to guide where you should invest your time, your budget, and otherwise in all of those automation techniques that I talked about earlier. So again, you can't do it all in 1 month, but take a look at what's really chewing up your time and then focus on that. Next month, look at something else, focus on it, and so on down the line. And make that a continuous process improvement. And I would argue that everybody plays a role, because even if you're in accounting, you're dependent on someone in sales to enter the data correctly. You're dependent on someone in operations to code in a project code correctly. You're dependent on order entry to make sure that they pick the right products from the pick list, and all the sub account and detail is all set up correctly. So everybody has a role to play, and everybody affects what goes on at the end of the month. So anybody that's involved can tell you all of the issues that they have and all of the people that they would like to include in this process. And I would say this is where you see the fruits of your labor really start to come in, because again, if you have a 2-week close process and you can get that down to a week and a half, you can get that down to a week. Think of the power and the amount of time you have. Now you have data that you can then pivot your business or pivot your strategy, rather than waiting for that 2 or 3 weeks to elapse before you can even look at the financials, because they're stale, they're old at that point, and they're almost, they're not valid anymore. All right. A few sort of areas I did want to touch on. Interfaces, while they may not be, we're talking about getting a third-party data and product into your ERP platform, they're still very relevant. Especially when it comes to things what I would call like triggers, meaning if something happens in another system, let's say you have Salesforce and you're doing lead and CRM management in Salesforce, but you want to trigger that to make sure that the customer or the contact or the opportunity gets closed and transitioned into Acumatica so that you can then issue an invoice in real time. That's where these interfaces come into play. And really there's 3 major ones in use today. The first one is APIs. Automated programming interfaces. They're typically real time. The benefit is that they utilize what we call the business layer for validation and security, meaning you don't have to write a bunch of code to check to see whether the customer exists in Acumatica. When you run an API against Acumatica to put an opportunity against a customer, if that customer doesn't exist, that API will fail, and therefore the source system will know, wait a minute, that customer's not there, I need to add it into the system. So the next step would be, we try to post an opportunity, wait, the customer doesn't exist, go ahead and actually add the customer into Acumatica so that we can accept that opportunity. And all that can be done in basically near to real time. The other method is what we call an ETL, or extract, transact, and load, meaning it's some sort of a integration platform like a Boomi or others, where it does the import of the data, it does some kind of transformation to restructure the data, and then it does a batch upload into the ERP platform. And then finally, there's the ability to do manual invoice or imports using templates. So basically what you typically do is you go into the screen, like in Acumatica, you'd output a sample export of the data, and there you have your template. you'd update it with the new information, and you turn around and you hit one click and you re-upload it right back into the system. And again, very similar to an API, it's using the functions on the screen, the security roles, all the information is built in the application to make sure you're not loading bad data. So you're not bringing in inventory that you don't have an inventory code for, or you're not coding to a general ledger that you don't have a general ledger code for. It will stop you when you're trying to do that import and make you correct it. All right. Dashboarding and reporting, while they're not technically, I wouldn't consider them an automation tool. They're certainly a way to automate the process of collecting and presenting data. And we can talk about the differences between dashboards and reports. Typically, reports are something that you go and you make a conscious effort to run. However, with this concept of a dashboard, we can actually combine things like an actual report onto a dashboard so you can see it in sort of real time and have the ability to then drill down and look at it further. So, the question you have to ask is make sure that your dashboarding supports what we call drill through capability, meaning that you can click on a dashboard and go all the way down to the source transaction and be able to look at, why did this event happen, or why am I looking at this kind of information. And then on the manufacturing side, the ability to integrate sensors and what we call the Internet of Things, basically that whether they be anything from a barcode scanner to some kind of infrared device to a camera on the shop floor, all of that can be added to your dashboard to give the back office folks that visibility that they really need into the operation. And here's just a sample dashboard on the Acumatica side, just a little screen snip that I took. You can see it's got a whole list of different types of widgets, we call them, or different components, everything from a pie chart to a report list to a graph, or what we call these tiles. And tiles are really, think about it like a query of the system. So, one of them here is, orders to ship. So what the system is doing is automatically running a query to say how many orders are out there waiting to ship, and the status of shipment pending. And it's displaying that for you in a color-coded fashion. And what you do is you define what green means, what yellow means, what red means. So for example, if anything over 50 orders to ship is considered too much, and that's a problem, then we would set that up to show up in red. Likewise, on the open support cases, if overdue cases are more than 50% of open cases, then maybe the overdue turns red, or something to that effect. So there are many ways with color that you can alert people very quickly. And then these dashboards, you can drill down by clicking on them and going all the way back to the original source transaction, whether that be from payables, receivables, manufacturing, order entry, CRM. It will take you back to that original transaction so you can take a look at it and really analyze it. And finally, this concept of role-based visibility and security, meaning if I'm in the accounts receivable function, I'm probably not going to see anything about payroll or inventory. Whereas if I'm in finance, maybe I see a lot of the different functions and tiles and things that are available here, just because I'm involved in different areas. So both from I don't want to see it, and also maybe I'm not allowed to see it, or I am, and it's part of my job function, and it should be added in. All right. I talked earlier about notifications. This idea of being able to distribute information, whether that be a report that you want to send out automatically, or you just want to be able to notify somebody that a transaction is missing, or some data it's been set up sort of incorrectly, or there's an anomaly. But this idea of notifying either through the application for those that come in every day and use the app, or sending it to their mobile device, to the mobile version of this, or posting it on some other text message, for example, if you did SMS integration. So there's the ability to not only schedule a report or schedule any kind of function really in the platform, but also send notifications out to users to be able to react appropriately. And again, automate so that you don't have to come in every morning, look at who are the offenders, and send out a raft of emails to say, please fix the data. Have the system tell them automatically. I mentioned right at the beginning, many of us have to do 1099 compliance. We have to file 1099 records with the federal government and certain states. So even Mark, we have a product that does 1099 filing, but what we ask our clients to do and what we do when we work on their accounting systems is we say, rather than waiting until January of the coming year in order to analyze your 1099 vendors, you have about 2 weeks to get all your 1099s ready. It's this huge push. It's just like tax compression season. What we're saying is, why don't you work on it all throughout the year? And so what Acumatica has done is put some functions in place around on the vendor master to be able to flag certain vendors that are 1099 eligible, and also in the accounts payable process to flag certain GL accounts that also are used to accumulate 1099 eligible expenses. Because you may have a vendor that gets paid for several different services. One service is eligible for, is required 1099 compliance and filing, and another service and another spend may not be. And what often happens is our clients wait and they do that analysis at year end. They take an accounts payable ledger and they extract it. They go through it, and there's this huge push to now find out we don't have enough W-9s for our vendors. And, do it in advance, do it as it happens, do it as each invoice is issued, and you'll be in a lot better shape come the end of the year. All right. So as we wind down here, what are the takeaways that I wanted to get across today? And I hope I've done that. First and foremost is that, today's modern ERP platform is very rich and deep in functionality. And while I don't expect, everybody to be a master across the board, because it is very complex, take that time to learn 5% more. Take that time to learn one more piece of automation that's within the platform. And I think you'll be a lot better off for it. You'll free up some of your time to do more strategy work, to do more analysis work. Something to keep in mind, although many of us tend to try to push back on it, but the majority of the tasks that we perform are rule-based and repetitive. And it's across the board. I think McKinsey did a study and said about 40% of the work we do today is actually rules-based and repetitive, which is stunning, which means it's highly applicable and eligible for some form of automation and efficiency improvement. You can only unlock the true value with a commitment to process improvement. Again, this can't be something you do once a year or once every 5 years, or just because it's the latest fad. It's got to be something you do every month. And I talked about close management and the importance of looking at those tasks. Even small increases in functionality can have dramatic impact. I talked about the idea of GL allocations. That can save hours of time of somebody who's taking, cost account data and blowing that out to a whole variety of subsidiaries and products and things. That can be a very tedious process if done manually. Measure, right? You can't fix what you don't know. You can't fix what you don't understand. You have to measure it. You have to use KPIs and keep using them over and over again. And the goal is to drive those down. Okay. So don't stop measuring. And finally, if we use 5% of those features today, as Satya from CEO of Microsoft said, let's make that goal 10% by the end of the first quarter. Let's take the next 3 months and add 5% more automation to our cycle. And again, that doesn't just have to be in accounting. It can be in operations. It could be out in the shop floor. It all comes back into the general ledger at the end of the day. And if you can get yourself to 25% of those features, you're going to be highly efficient compared to your peer group. All right. So last polling question is really just, again, make sure everybody's still with us and get your CP credits. But also, we're interested in, are you interested in more information on this topic? Love to talk to you about process improvement, specifically around ERP. We can talk about process automation and other skills and techniques that are out there, but lots of capability and lots of interest to talk in that area. So I'll give you a minute and then we'll just talk about upcoming webinars, and I'll check and see if there's any questions. All right, so just want to let everybody know that we do have a couple more webinars coming up, and always regularly scheduled. Keep checking back at our website, markhamevents.com. But we have streamlining your month-end close process, which is rather relevant for the discussion today. I mentioned this concept of close management. And we have an organization, a vendor called Trintech, that does specializes in close management. So they do a lot of detailed task analysis work with you, and capture that in their platform. And they also do a lot of detailed reconciliation matching, which can be very helpful as well. And then in October, another session around ERP and construction and leveraging technology for growth. And again, we'll be talking about some of the work that Acumatica does in construction, that version of their industry version of construction. All right, so that's all I have on the presentation part. I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions that I can answer at this point.
Thank you, Rob. There hasn't been any questions within the chat, but we do have a few minutes for folks who may want to submit any questions. And just a friendly reminder for anybody who may have trickled down into our webinar a little bit later. So this webinar is eligible for CPE. The only two requirements would be that you would have to stay active for 50 minutes and then answer 3 polling questions. And then please allow 24 to 48 hours in order for us to process your CPE certification. And then for those who are not so concerned about CPE or just generally want a recording and the slides of this presentation, that will be sent out post-event. Rob, there has not been any questions, and we do really greatly appreciate all the knowledge that you have provided to us. And thank you all that have joined us.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.